Hi and welcome back to a new video. Long time ago, 15-20 years, cases were much more basic, which led to some of the cases being more modular. So you could, for some cases, then mount radiators in the top and have some accessories in the front. But over the years, cases were advancing. They become much more advanced and the need for modularity kinda disappeared. So just from my point of view, in the past 10 years, we didn't really see a lot of really modular cases, like modularity that comes from the vendor directly. Obviously, with like popular cases such as 11 Dynamic, we saw accessories from third-party vendors. But from the vendor itself, it is quite rare to see real modular parts and accessories you can buy directly from the vendor. So last year at Computex, we already saw this, the Frame 4000. Corsair was showing this in a modified version. They had like LCD on the side, different front panel, front I/O was replaceable, different motherboard tray, and this is finally available. You can buy the case and you can buy accessories separately, but you can also configure this directly from the start and have your unique case, which I think is pretty nice. You can get, as I said, different motherboard tray, fully different front panel, front I/O. There's a lot more you can do, and I think this deserves its own dedicated video. Thermal Grizzly Duronaut is our new high-end thermal paste and the successor of Cryonaut. It's even better performing, it is much easier to apply, it is cheaper, and it's much more durable. That's where the name comes from. Especially if you're now maybe considering to buy a new PC, then I would highly recommend that you're looking into this thermal paste. So let's continue with this video. Base is always a Corsair Frame 4000, which has been out for quite a while, so I will not repeat all the features of the case and so on. But what Corsair did is that you can replace the main outside components. So you can replace the side panel, front I/O, PSU shroud on the bottom, and the motherboard tray. And those are also the parts that are configurable in the configurator online directly when you want to purchase like a specific or modified version. Like for example, this one comes already with the RGB flow front panel, that's how it's called. I guess we will see RGB once the system is actually built. We're starting with the simple item, which is the front I/O. Stock, you have the power button, audio jack, dual USB Type A and a Type C. So that is exactly this piece right here. And if you lift up the case from the bottom, you will be able to access two screws right here. If you remove them, you can take out the front I/O, exactly this part. So that's the stock panel that's included. And then you can choose this one if you want to, which replaces the two Type A with two Type C. So you can go with 3 Type C connectors if you want to. And what's also cool is that this is also available in white. And you can also combine the white one with the black case. So there's really full modularity. You can decide yourself the color combination you want. So you can go, for example, with a black body. You can go with a white front and like a black front I/O, like white front I/O. So there's tons of options how you can configure this thing. So that's in general already a great start. Corsair went completely nuts on everything they sent to me. Because first I thought it's just about a pre-configured case. And I was already happy about getting this specific one. Then turned out that I was getting, you know, box after box, shipment after shipment, and I ended up with a lot of stuff that's piled up around the camera. I'm always happy that you can't see what's behind the camera. It's such a mess in here, but you know, it's YouTube, you can only see this, so this is quite nice for me. And they sent a bunch of different front panels. We have this RGB flow one that is also installed right there. And I think even if you like airflow, this is probably a good replacement for the stock front panel, which is optimized for airflow. It has this specific 3D shape and it's good for ventilation. But even I think the wooden one, so there is this more like basic wooden one, costs about 35 euros. I think this one is actually fairly priced as well as the RGB flow one. This one costs about 25 euros, so I think this price is absolutely fair for what you're getting, and I also think this will look pretty nice, pretty high quality. Then there is this Corsair Elite wooden front panel. It costs 70 euros, so it's much more expensive. It is in the range where other people are buying in an entire case. That is something you definitely have to point out. But it's very unique. Wood is a nature resource, which means that it's not that easy to process and every part will look a little bit unique, you know? So that is something I guess you will get from this Elite front panel, and it has this specific weird 3D shape. I'm not quite sure yet how this will look like. I think all of these, especially the glass pixel style one. I have to check out how this looks like once it's assembled in the case. I think I've never seen a case with such a front panel. Not sure how this will look like just like that. It's a bit odd, but I can imagine that if you have an RGB fan sitting directly behind it, this might actually look quite cool. But to just go back to the pricing. So, you know, if you configure all the parts going from front panel, like the mainboard tray and side panel and all this, you can easily bump up the price of the case over 400 euros. So that's definitely the downside, but there is no other way of doing this. And I think it's fine because you will end up with a pretty unique system. It is also super easy to swap these parts. I mean, I don't think that people will have many different ones. Well, I guess I will have to take out the RGB cable properly later, but if we just replace this with the wooden front, maybe. Yeah, a couple of seconds, and it looks completely different. Not sure yet what to think of the 3D shape of the wood. I think I'm more of a fan of the standard wood of this one. Yeah, very simple, can swap it within seconds, so that's very user-friendly, and it completely changes the appearance. But I also have to say, even though I like the wooden look, I'm still curious how this one will look like in person. I will probably leave that one on for now, because I think with RGB, that might actually look quite cool. Before we get to all of the side panels, this all-glass version is what came with my pre-configured one. And this is also why they added the extra PSU shroud. And I would probably always get this one. It's a little bit shorter. The stock one has an extra bar that sits right here. For the stock frame 4000D, you have a glass panel that's only like this size. And you have an extra mesh on the bottom. And that's why if you would replace the stock side panel with the glass one, you would be able to see inside in the bottom. You might want to see this, but most people probably want to hide the cables underneath there. That would be the same for me. And that's why it would be recommended to get this one, so it's closing off on the side and you can't see the mess that is being caused down there. But especially for water cooling builds, this specific one can make it a little bit easier to access this area in the front. So if you're planning to use this for custom water cooling, then I would definitely recommend to get this, because you have more space in the front for like thicker radiators, this stack of like fans radiator, and then also adding a pump, for example. This just gives you more room. Now that we're talking about building inside and like space and all these kind of things, we can quickly go over the motherboard tray. That's the stock tray. And I mean, motherboard tray is this thing where you just mount your motherboard on. Usually this is nothing you pay much attention for. Ideally, you don't care because it just works, right? You have all the screw mounting positions to fit your motherboard on. And for example, in this case, you also have cutouts everywhere if you would want to use like a BTF motherboard, for example. There's also this big cutout, and in this position, you can additionally, or well, in stock condition, you have this extra plate where you can mount your IQ Link controller. I just removed this real quick for the comparison. But apart from that, this is just like a standard motherboard tray. You can remove a few screws and then take out the motherboard tray easily. You are left with 3 options in the end. The first option is the one that's already built inside the system, the one I just showed you. The second option would be this one, which they call Rapid Route 2.0. And that is, Rapid Route is always about cable management for Corsair. That's how they call it. But I have to be honest that the stock option in the Frame 4000 is already good enough. Like this, it has those extra cutouts, the rectangle cutouts, and you have those, just additional cable mounts that you can clip into those rectangles and just, somehow easier attach a few cables. But I don't really see how this enhances your overall experience much. From my personal opinion, the stock option is good enough, even though this is pretty cheap with only about 13 euros. What I absolutely like though is this CNC milled motherboard tray. I remember this from Computex last year when I saw it installed in a system. It instantly enhances the value, that like just the feel that you get of your system if you have this built inside. It just looks higher quality. And we're actually looking at the back side right now, and this is the side where you would mount your motherboard. It's CNC milled 6mm, so it definitely has some stability to it. Corsair calls this diamond milled, diamond polished edges. It's not, I don't really like the diamond edges, or like this shiny edge, but that's up to you probably. But in general, this has a very good high quality feel. However, it costs 80 euros. Objectively speaking, the part, even though it's super nicely made, doesn't make too much sense, because once it's installed and you have the motherboard sitting in front of it, you won't be able to see much of this. This is something you just have to know. But what I also found interesting is that Corsair offers free 3D files that you can download to turn this into a bench table. I mean, it's already almost a bench table. These are UNC 6x32 type threads. And if you have some standoffs, you could easily just turn this into a bench table. But you can also check those 3D files online if this is something for you. I'm not sure if anybody will actually do this, but at least they are for free and you can download them and you could turn this into a bench table if you wanted to. So you just remove these screws on the back. I think it's 4 in total. So this one in the center, one here, one here, one here. And then you can take out the motherboard tray. And that would be the back side once it's installed. And I also noticed that these tiny meshes right here, they're also mounted with screws. They are steel. They are probably powder coated or something like that. And you can see they have a slightly different surface finish than the aluminum. I just want to see how this turns out, how it looks like once we remove these. I think I would even prefer this over stock condition. I think I would leave it exactly that way. I just realized if you bought the CNC milled one as an aftermarket part and you have this as a replacement, you can also turn this one into a bench table. You just need UNC type standoffs with a very long thread, and then just add a second type of standoff from the bottom, and you would have this floating. Can use this as a very cheap bench table if you wanted to. Now the side panels. We already talked about a stock condition with a glass window and a small cover on the bottom. Then we had the replacement full tempered glass side panel. And then there is also this option, which is an extra cold air intake for the bottom, where you can mount either 3x120 or 3x140mm fans. I think you would have to remove the PSU shroud. That wouldn't make any sense because you would blow the air directly on the PSU, and it would also block, yeah, just clearance wise, that wouldn't make sense. You would have to go with the stock PSU shroud. And then you have this extra glass part that just goes on here and then covers like 2/3 of the side panel with glass, 1/3 as extra cold air intake. Could make sense if you have, I don't know, 5090 and you want to give it extra fresh air. Might help you a little bit with the temperature. You can also go the absolute crazy way if you want to include a Xeneon Edge. That is a 14.5 LCD touchscreen, and you can include it basically the same way as the cold air intake. So you have this extra piece of sheet metal that goes on the bottom, and there you would integrate the Xeneon, I have no clue how this is pronounced in English, but this thing, which costs extra 250 euros. Yeah, that will make your build really expensive. And even if you might not believe it with the Corsair, but you can still hide your RGB if you don't like it, you can get this very simple steel side panel for 18 euros, also I think fair price, and then hide whatever is inside. Originally, I wanted to have like a 3-4 minute introduction into what is this about, show some of the pieces and then build a system, but I realized it's much more complex, so it took a bit more time. So we will postpone building a system to one of the future videos. I still hope you enjoyed this. I think you can also click yourself through the configurator if you want to and just check out what kind of different options you have. Hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time. Bye bye.